Each chapter of Deltarune has a different version number because each chapter is technically a separate game, and the chapter select acts as a launcher. This is why playtesters were needed for chapters 1 and 2 again before the release of 3 and 4 to see if this system worked. The bloodstain by the cage in Chris's room that's been bugging fans for almost 7 years can actually be cleaned up with the help of Susie. Susie will also help decorate Chris's side of the room by giving them one of Asriel's stars and dubbing it the Susie Prize. This doesn't change the look of Chris's room in Castletown, but will lead to Susie saying they have a lot of awards, but not the best one. Save points weren't in the light world until this chapter due to the prolonged amount of time the player would spend in it. It's possible to get a powerful healing item right at the beginning of chapter 4. The ancient suite is found in Asriel's old clothes that Susie's wearing during church service. The requirements for this item are pretty strict, not only having nothing in Chris's inventory or storage to distract Susie, but also not obtaining very specific lootable items in chapter 1 and 2's Dark Worlds. The easiest way to trigger this is to start a fresh chapter 4 save without importing previous chapter saves. Stay awake during the service and search the pockets to find an embarrassing note to Caddy from Asriel and the chocolate. This item cures 400 HP for Chris and 40 for anyone else. Different juice combinations have unique names. 100% yellow is Mystic Nectar, 100% red is Blood of Power, 50-50 of both is Orange Juice, and 75% red and 25% yellow is Sunset Requiem. 25% red and 75% yellow is Alphys's drink mixture because it produces a similar shade of light orange as her skin if on a white background. There was a line removed in later versions of Deltarune when exploring Hometown. Upon discovering Caddy drinking the free milk left out by Alphys, Susie originally called her a furry degenerate, but now calls her a furry freak. Speaking of Alphys, Susie still avoids her in the Overworld, no longer following Chris and looking around nonchalantly. Despite Onion Sand telling the player to meet them again tomorrow in chapter 2, they're nowhere to be seen in chapter 4. Informing Sans his open sign should say closed, it'll make him change it to Clopen, then to his own face. Also, you can now peek into Sans' house and it will describe the interior from Undertale. Temmie can be found in the classroom and will sing segments of Don't Forget. This came about due to a cover of Don't Forget Temmie made and uploaded a few years back. Speaking of Temmie, her cat/dog design was made by an artist friend named Betty Kwong. It was this sketch Temmie would go on to use as her persona, but according to the Fangamer Temmie interview, if this drawing never existed, she likely would have gone with a more fluffy bunny design. In a non-weird run, Noelle overcame her fear of mice in chapter 2, as seen by the dialogue from the scarf-wearing mouse mentioning someone calling them cute. The Tea Party chair not being named is a reference to Toriel's chair being named Chariel. If you give the gift to Ralsei in chapter 2, the plushie inside will be the only item in his room in chapter 4. While exploring the holiday residence, the player could steal a pencil from Noelle's desk. This pencil actually becomes an equipable weapon in the Dark World called the Jingle Blade. Waiting in the basement when trapped under the angel statue will lead to Noelle and Susie talking about Dragon Blazers 2, and even mention how that game has an evil route. This is foreshadowing to the fact that Dragon Blazers is based on Lord of the Hammer, which in and of itself is based on the prophecy. Funnily enough, staying still when Susie actually tells you to later in the scene doesn't lead to any additional dialogue. The empty mascot outfit in the basement of the holiday residence was used by Undertale in the room before the console-exclusive Mad Mew Mew fight. There's a secret scene with Asgore if the player takes the soul to Carol's room from the back room through the vents. He'll mention the Black Shard, the weapon the player got from the knight if they beat them in chapter 3. There's also a secret when scouring the vents in the kitchen, as when Chris walks out of frame, they begin playing the piano. Chris is in the kitchen in the first place because they don't eat under our control. When we feed them items in the Dark World, it's not actually feeding them, and in scenes like the pancake breakfast earlier in this chapter, we don't prompt them to eat. This explains why they nabbed themselves some chocolate milk, and also why they ate the entire tin of pie between chapters 1 and 2. When the player attempts to read the note on Dessa's guitar the second time when the soul is separated from Chris, they grab the player and bring them into the closet to avoid being seen by Susie and Noelle. In early versions of chapter 4, if the player looks closely when the doors open, they'll see a second Chris already inside slumped over. The weird route of chapter 4 plays the holiday residence scene drastically different, with the soul having to force back control of Chris through dialogue options. The player can then force Noelle to re-equip the Thorn Ring. The graphic when putting it on was changed from falling rose petals to a single red pixel, then finally to a cracked glass effect. If the player abandons the weird route at a particular moment, Chris will grab Noelle and storm out of her room with a huge grimace on their face. A level of expressiveness unlike how we've seen Chris thus far, all but proving a disdain for our choices. If the player turns on the last dancing Santa before triggering the dialogue with Carol, she'll tell Chris to turn it off to save batteries. PlayStation versions of Deltarune have trophies due to it being a requirement on the system. That's not the only difference, as the PlayStation 5 version of Deltarune runs at 31 FPS, making it slightly faster than other versions of the game. It is possible to reach the knight at the beginning of the Dark World, only Chris won't attack them. Susie's heal spell is impossible to use after Ralsei makes her feel bad about it, due to it costing 102% TP, and the TP max being 100. This is reversed after the JOCKINGTON fight, as her confidence is restored by helping the big guy. The gooey enemies are named after the Chinese word for ghost, even resembling the character for the written word. Though they are ghostly, they aren't actual ghosts according to their recruitment description. There's a hidden alcove next to one of the climbing spots in the first darkness area that contain gloves that make you worse at climbing. The Balthazar enemies appear to be living incense burners in the shape of lizards. Their namesake, Balthazar, is a holy figure in Christianity, being one of the 3 wise men that gave gifts to Jesus. Balthazar's gift was myrrh, a commonly used incense ingredient known for its healing properties. Gerson Boom joins the party for a while during this chapter, helping out in combat and with navigation, but fans of Undertale already know this character. He was a shopkeeper in Waterfall and would explain the legend of Deltarune if the player asked. There's actually an unused light world design for Gerson in the game files, and between you and me, I like this one a lot more than the one Toby went for. When Susie squashes Ralsei when grabbing a book for Gerson, the player can actually get Chris to lie down next to him as an act of empathy. The player can permanently increase Chris's max HP by telling Gerson to go even further left when navigating the darkness. Magic glass will lead the way to a chest which will increase Chris's HP by a glorious 1 point. The candy bowl in the early part of Sanctuary isn't the only direct nod to Undertale in this Dark World, as donating over 9,999 Dark Dollars to the fountain will result in the player receiving the Gold Widow armor later in this chapter. The organic in the room will also mention how you might as well have given it to a spider, nodding to the Undertale character Muffet. 9,999 gold is the price of one of Muffet's items, so the organic in this room refers to Dark Dollars as gold. Bibliox being books is revealed in this chapter, meaning the Bibliox back in chapter 3 was Toriel's book of hymns in the living room. The Bibliox wizards will sometimes say, "It was the best of times, it was the blurst of times," which is a reference to a line in the Simpsons episode Last Exit to Springfield. Birdley actually read out the correct version of this Charles Dickens quote back in chapter 2. Toby Fox posted on Blue Sky that when showing off a certain minigame to friends and family for an upcoming chapter, they described it as a cry for help because your game's not out. We now know that the minigame was likely the Jackenstein fight, as the whole theme of the fight is "you're taking too long." There are several Easter eggs if the player performs certain melodies on the giant piano. Motifs of his theme, Flowey, Heartache, Lost Girl, and more all get unique reactions from Susie and Ralsei. But the most drastic is playing the first 4 notes of Megalovania, causing the annoying dog to hit Chris with their car, just like in the chapter 2 Easter egg. Just like the previous chapters, this one also contains a secret egg, though not as complicated to obtain as previous chapters. Simply walking between these 2 rooms in the second sanctuary will result in being dropped off in the egg room, this time taking the form of a hospital. Deciding to paint the man will result in an incomplete drawing, then covered up by a tree, where a nearby egg can be picked up off an easel. It is actually possible we saw the man behind the tree earlier in this chapter. After exploring Noelle's house, examining the diner will tell the player it's full, but if they've obtained the previous chapter's eggs, there will be instead a customer inside who excitedly points at their takeout container. Speaking of things similar in each chapter, Chapter 4 indeed has its own hidden boss in the form of a showdown between Susie and Gerson to prove her worth. The player would need to explore the sanctuary to get the pieces of the melody needed to unlock Gerson's office door. Where there, he will ask for a crazy amount of money for the new axe, or the opportunity to overcome a challenge. The old man or fake Gerson fight can actually be ended early with the use of tension items, increasing the player's TP. Attempting to backtrack after Susie reads the final prophecy is impossible, as just out of sight, a hand perfectly prevents the player from going that way. During the sword dodging hallway section where everyone is reduced to 1 HP, the party forms a triangle with the knight above them. The imagery momentarily reflects the symbol of the Deltarune. When running to the Titan, Ralsei can fly/hover. He's never done that before. Titan spawns actually die when reduced to 0 hit points instead of fleeing. If the player found the original Starwalker all the way back in chapter 1, he will be one of the Darkners in the tower. But this isn't the first place he's been in this chapter. Starwalker will appear in the Susie prophecy room among all the statues. During the Titan fight, Ralsei has a unique spell for recovering Chris from being downed. The graphic of the spell is incredibly similar to the help action from either Spampton fight, being a flying angel in the shape of Ralsei. Susie will dunk Chris, and therefore Chris's soul, while shouting "get dunked on," a nod to the same line Sans uses when you attempt to spare him during an Undertale genocide route. After sealing the fountain, if the player attempts to search the closet in the church, it will say, "It's a door, a large person could fit inside." You turn the doorknob, you didn't do anything else. This implies the knight is hiding in the closet, and Chris is preventing us from seeing who it is early. The song that plays after sealing the church is called "The Place Where It Rained," which seems to be a response to the Undertale song "It's Raining Somewhere Else." Susie says she likes the smell after rain. For anyone who's not on AO3, that's called petrichor. Players can actually return to their save file once the credits have rolled for some extra Chapter 4 playtime. The player can take Chris back to Castletown to face off against the man, the myth, the legend, Mike. Or is it men, myths, and legends? As it turns out, 3 different opponents take on the mantle of Mike, all of which seem to be based on fan interpretations of the character. This fight is actually entirely different on console. puzzles. Though none of these fakers are the real Mike, he may be in the room. Walking all the way to the right of the room and waiting will reveal a giant microphone that quickly vanishes. When replaying the Batat minigame and getting a crazy high score, a familiar pink and yellow-eyed smile joins the crazy dodge and grab gameplay. Friend, as their name in the game files, is the recurring presence seen in each chapter since 2, originally appearing in Queen's basement, then a few times in Chapter 3, now in this minigame in Chapter 4. But they were hiding in plain sight earlier in this chapter. In the third sanctuary with the illuminating sound panels, their dark, smiling silhouette can be seen just out of reach. Throughout this chapter, there are several clues alluding to the location of Chapter 5, likely to take place in Asgore's shop, Flower King. During the secret fight against Gerson, he'll break down Lord of the Hammer by chapter, revealing the fifth to take place in the Field of Pink and Gold. The vast garden is charred in an inferno of jealousy. Additionally, one of the hidden pieces of the prophecy revealed the Flower Man trapped in Asylum, clearly alluding to Asgore. The Bibliox Wizard's spell check coincides with the names of songs in Deltarune's OST, and the ones that don't fit this Flower King motif. Not only that, but the backgrounds of one of the JOCKINGTON segments reveals the symbol of a king, queen, knight, bishop, sword, and flower.